So the Iranians, from their perspective, won. And the proof of the pudding is their position in Islamabad, where they feel that they have all the leverage and the United States has none because they do not believe, frankly, nor does anybody else in the Middle East believe, that Donald Trump will renew the war if the talks fail.
Today is Monday, April 13th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. Over the weekend, U.S. and Iranian negotiators met in Pakistan to try and broker an end to the war. After 21 hours of talks, Vice President J.D. Vance announced that no agreement had been reached. He said the U.S. was seeking a clear commitment from Iran that it would not pursue a nuclear weapon and give up the capabilities that would allow it to move quickly toward one. Iran rejected those terms, and now both sides are blaming each other for the breakdown. That leaves the situation in a fragile place and raises questions about the 2-week ceasefire that began last week. Without a commitment from Iran to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, global energy supplies remain under pressure. Weeks of fighting significantly degraded Iran's military capabilities. But even without a fully functioning Navy or Air Force, Iran has a vast network of low-cost drones and missiles positioned along its coastline, which is enough to threaten one of the most critical arteries in the global economy. So the question is, what now? To think this through, I'm joined today by Dr. Michael Oren, historian, author, and former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Let's get into it. Dr. Michael Oren, welcome back to Boundless Insights.
Such a delight to be with you, truly. I'm not being facetious. It is a delight.
I appreciate that. Are you ready to get into it?
Unfortunately, yes.
There's a lot to talk about. I haven't actually spoken to you since the war ended. There were obviously these negotiations in Pakistan that didn't result in a deal. So you tell me, where would you like to start?
Well, I'd like to start back in a television program of the 60s and 70s called Let's Make a Deal.
Okay.
If you're old, you're probably not old enough.
No, I am not old enough.
There was a great program. It had a wonderful Jewish host called Monty Hall. Monty Hall, he would get people out of the audience who were dressed in weird ways and get them to choose between two doors or two panels. What was behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. And it occurred to me, the Monty Hall "Let's Make a Deal" analogy appeared to me as we look at this period after the ceasefire, if we can actually call it a ceasefire, or after the negotiations, if we can actually call them negotiations. Which door are we behind? So let's start with door number 1. Door number 1 says Iran lost the war. Iran has no economy. It has no friends in the Middle East. No one's going to invest in Iran. It's going to take Iran many, many years to rebuild the estimated $300 billion in damage that have been inflicted on its industry, on its military.
How much?
$300 billion. That was an estimate I heard today. On his Navy. Just think about how much the Navy cost. Okay, how much does a frigate cost? How much does a submarine cost? Very quickly get to $300 billion. The infrastructure, the bridges. It'll take them years to replenish it. They have earned the distrust of all the states around them, et cetera, et cetera. And they have lost their primary leadership, and everything you have to say about that. And Iran lost the war. It no longer can really have that. It never can't maintain a ring of fire around Israel that it had, on October 6, 2023. Hamas and Hezbollah are still there. The Houthis are still there, but they're nowhere near the threat they were on the morning of October 7, 2023. So that's behind door number 1. Behind door number 2 is Iran has won the war, and America has lost.
I don't like that door.
I don't like that door. Well, nobody does. But door number 2 begins with the definition of victory. So the American definition of victory is how many boats you sank, right? How many factories you blew up, how many bridges you destroyed.
How many straits you reopened so that they're safe for commercial vessels.
Well, we're not there yet. But you're getting to the Iranian version of victory, right? First of all, like Hamas, it's we lived, we survived, we came out of the rubble, we flashed a V sign, and we live another day. And we don't think in terms of weeks and months. We think in terms of years and decades. And who knows, a decade or two from now, we could be much stronger than we ever were. We're now about to embark on a major strategic alliance with China, certainly with Russia. We control the Straits of Hormuz. We maintain our 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium probably with some centrifuges buried deep under a mountain. We are no longer have to say we're not committed to not getting a nuclear weapon. America has been exposed as a more or less paper tiger. Yeah, it causes some damage, but at the end of the day, America lost its stomach for the war and ran away. And the Arab states of the Gulf were smart. They read Donald Trump better than the Israelis did, because they realized early on in the war that America would lose its stomach for the war and retreat and leave them with a wounded and very vengeful Iran. Therefore, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which together have close to 900 frontline jet fighters, did not take any one of them to the air, did not fight at all.
That's really interesting, because I constantly wondered why, after being attacked, they didn't participate in the mission against Iran.
Because they didn't believe America had the staying power. That's the bottom reason. And they read, I must say, they read America better than the Israeli leaders did. And they have to keep a pathway open to Tehran. They're going to have to go back there on hands and knees and beg. And guess what? Iran is controlling their export of oil on top of everything else. So the Iranians, from their perspective, won. And the proof of the pudding is their position in Islamabad, where they feel that they have all the leverage and the United States has none, because they do not believe, frankly, nor does anybody else in the Middle East believe, that Donald Trump will renew the war if the talks fail. And in fact, I think in the last 24 hours, he's come out and said, listen, I don't even need a deal in Islamabad. I don't care about the Straits of Hormuz. The 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium can remain underground. They're not going to be able to get it. He calls it nuclear dust. So that's behind door number 2. You can choose either one of them.
Oh, those are the only 2 doors.
Well, there's an Israeli door, number 3.
Okay.
Which you really don't want to open. So on one hand, maybe it's just another set of doors, but the other door is, yes, we've proven ourselves to be the preeminent military power in the Middle East.
But it seems to me that it's something between those 2 extremes.
Of course, but I'll get to that. It's all going to come together. There actually is no door 1, 2, and 3. There's really just one door without a number, which is a combination of all of these. So we've proven ourselves to be the non-pareil military force in the Middle East. America lost 8 warplanes altogether. 3 were shot down by a Kuwaiti pilot, apparently a jihadist. 2 were shot down over Iran, and 3 were lost in the battle against the Houthis. Okay. So 7 altogether, plus another plane that crashed, a fueling plane. Israeli Air Force flew thousands of sorties, 1,300 miles away, and we didn't lose a single airplane. And our airplanes are much, much older than the American airplanes, much older. And our turnaround time is a third of what the American turnaround time is, and our percentage of actual hits on targets is much, much higher. We can all be very, very proud of that. We're there. True. And Israeli society proved itself to be the most resilient society on earth. We would have gone on for I don't know how much longer, probably indefinitely, with rockets falling down, with reservists being called up, if we believed that there was actually going to be an end to this war. The hardest day of this 40-day war was the day it ended. And I'm speaking now for just about everybody I spoke to. This whole country went into a profound depression on that day, the day of the ceasefire.
Was it abrupt for Israelis? Did anybody see that coming?
Well, there was an actual date, March 26th. I know because I was on a live television panel in Israel. And we all listened to Karen Levitt, the spokeswoman, and General Trump saying, and President Trump that night saying, listen, we've won the war. And I turned to the panelists and I said, guys, we got to be prepared for this to end any minute. It could end any minute. And the generals on this panel sort of scoffed at me. No, we have weeks, we have months. And I said, no, they're already building a victory narrative. And once they build that victory narrative, they're going to go with it because of, if you have to choose between security on Israel's northern border and gas prices in the United States.
Yes.
They're going to go with gas prices.
Absolutely.
And by the way, it's legitimate. It's legitimate from America's interest.
And that note about the narrative I actually thought was quite funny, because the day he ended the war, he said, we have changed the regime. The people that were there at the beginning of the war are all dead. So we've changed the definition of what regime change means. And by the new definition, they succeeded.
Yeah, but everything changed. He built that narrative. By the way, it was completely predictable. Completely predictable. I was not surprised in the least, but if I was surprised that the war went on a week longer than I thought it would. There's only one thing worse than being a false prophet. You should know.
Being a accurate false prophet?
Yeah, those are the people who get lynched and stoned in the Bible. And I was, go on these talk shows and say, listen, this could end at any minute, and everyone would be, laughing at me. Okay. I can take the slings and stones, okay?
I know Israelis are not happy that the war ended when it did, but do they feel like significant gains were made in the war? Do they feel like, well, the threat is still there? Nothing has changed from that perspective. Iran is a patient regime. It's ideological. It's deeply committed. It can absorb these enormous losses to its military and just wait it out because, as you said, still has the highly enriched uranium, still has its proxy in Hezbollah that can still fire missiles at Tel Aviv. It still has the ability to disrupt the global economy.
Now they're telling us that, it was during the General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying we've destroyed 90% of their launchers, 90% of their missile capacity. We'd be sitting in our safe room while these missiles are rocking the entire building. Many of them hit very close to where I'm talking to you, and say, listen, somebody in Tehran didn't get the memo. Hello, can someone please let them know that 90% of their launchers and missiles have been destroyed? And now it turns out that the latest intelligence says that they maintain half of their arsenal and half of their launchers. The launchers have been replenished. So what this comes down to is a major mowing of the lawn. We always say we have to mow the lawn every couple of years.
Meaning set them back militarily without taking them out.
Yeah, but we saw how quickly Hezbollah came back. Boy, did Hezbollah. Look how quickly Hezbollah came back in a year and a half.
They could still fire dozens of rockets every single day.
Yep. So, we know that these people have an ability to come back very, very quickly, especially if they have access to money. And one of my fears is that in the next round of negotiations in Islamabad, and I think there will be a next round of negotiations, and maybe one after that, maybe the Iranians will give up their arsenal, their stockpile of enriched uranium. Maybe they'll freeze enrichment for a certain number of years, but their quid pro quo that they will demand is a lifting of sanctions. And once sanctions are lifted, from our perspective, and the war, it's game over. Because then they'll get something in the order of what the Iranians got under the JCPOA, which is $1 trillion, and they're not going to use that money on schools and hospitals. And so it's a mowing of the lawn. I mean, unless you believe in door number one. And in door number one is that the Iranian regime is so grievously wounded that it's going to die of those wounds, that it's not going to be able to come back, and that its own people hate that regime. And eventually there'll be another uprising. You have to believe that could happen. But, dictatorial totalitarian regimes have a way of hanging on. Look at Cuba, for example. Look at North Korea. They have a way of hanging on. And you have a regime now that is no longer willing to say it is committed to not making a nuclear weapon. It's going to try its best to make a nuclear weapon. Well,
if anything, it says now they would be vindicated in doing so because look what Israel and the United States just did to them. They need to be able to protect themselves will be their story.
Exactly. So, this is where we are. I'm much more of a door number two man than I am a door number one. My door number one is the repository of my hopes. Door number two is the focus of my brain. Prepare for the worst, always. Prepare for what I was saying during the war. Prepare for the fact that Donald Trump may declare victory tonight and we're going to end. Then we get down to the nitty-gritty. We haven't even gotten to the tough stuff yet.
Well, just before we get to the tough stuff, can I just ask sort of tangential points, but I find them very interesting. I wonder if you could just say a couple of words about, one, Pakistan serving as the mediator in the negotiations, and two, that senior U.S. administration officials sat down face-to-face with Iranian regime representatives.
Senior? Well, I guess the foreign minister, Secretary of State John Kerry sat with the Javad, the foreign minister of Iran during the JCPOA negotiations. Okay, it happens. Pakistan's interesting. I mean, here you have a Pakistani foreign minister who's called for our destruction, calls it a cancer that has to be excised. But it's interesting. Pakistan's a Sunni country with nuclear capabilities, and a Sunni country that apparently sold some of its nuclear knowledge and blueprints to the Iranians way back when.
So as impartial as the United Nations. Perfect.
It's not an ideal situation. What can I say?
Michael, I have two key questions for you. Number one, do you think that the United States is willing to resume fighting against Iran because the negotiations broke down and it seems like they won't get a deal? And number two, I am very curious to be inside of Prime Minister Netanyahu's head because he had to be thinking going into this war, that regime's going to fall. There's going to be a decisive victory in Iran. I'm going to be the best friend of President Trump. There's going to be a great photo op, and I'm going to cruised to election victory in Israel. And now he's got to be thinking, oy vavoy.
So the chances of America renewing the fighting are very small, highly unlikely. Again, Trump has said in the last 24 hours that he doesn't really care whether there's a deal or not. The war is over. We won. Close the book on it. Okay. As for Netanyahu, it's not just a matter of winning or losing an election. It's his raison d'etre. He was born for this moment. He has prepared for this moment all of his life. And I must say that I don't know if any other prime minister could have done what he did. Many people are attacking him now, Yair Lapid and others saying it's the worst diplomatic disaster in Israel's history. Netanyahu did what he had to do. Let the New York Times and everyone else blame Israel for dragging America into a war, but we needed America to come help us because we were facing an existential threat from Iran. Existential threats, not just one. So Bibi did his duty, and he managed the Trump relationship as best as you can with a leader whose opinions and remarks and outlooks change, sometimes on a minute-to-minute basis. The best he could do. And I don't know anybody who could have handled it any better. It's what I used to say about the Gaza war. That 95% of Bibi's positions, his decisions during that war would have been made by any prime minister. Another prime minister would have been much more aggressive, by the way, much more aggressive, because Bibi is conflict averse. I could not begin to fathom the depth of his despair at this moment. And saying, I've waited all my life for this moment. This is what I've worked for. If you're in the Israeli army, you learn to charge an enemy position. It's called histarut, mistaer, you run. And the paratroopers, what I saw, as you charge, you go, acharai, after me. And you assume that everyone's charging with you. And the greatest fear of any paratrooper commander is that you're going to go charge after me, and you're going to turn around and find out you're the lone charging the enemy position. Bibi called out, Kadima listaer, let's go, let's charge. Acharai, after me, and turned around at the end of the day and found himself alone. Now, you ready for the nitty-gritty?
I am.
Okay, what's gone on? The nitty-gritty would begin with an article that appeared last week in the New York Times, a front-page article that is based on a book by two of the journalists that's probably coming out, How Donald Trump Dragged America into War. But it's a misleading title because the actual thrust of the article is how Israel dragged Donald Trump and America into war. Okay, and how key members of the president's staff, from J.D. Vance to the head of the CIA, even Marco Rubio, couched Netanyahu's suggestion that the United States and Israel could together, through military means, bring about a regime change in Iran. And in a popular uprising, it was farcical, it was bullshit, and yet Donald Trump went with it because Bibi was so persuasive. So at the same time that the administration was declaring this historic victory, it was also saying that Israel dragged America into an unnecessary war. Yeah, it was good that it resulted in a great victory, but we didn't have to get into this war at all if it weren't for those nasty Jews. And what was disturbing about this article was the sourcing. The sourcing was all based on multiple anonymous sources within the administration. It didn't come from, AOC, Bernie Sanders, or even Tucker Carlson. It came within the administration. That's nitty-gritty number one. Then the issue of Lebanon. Now, I cannot stress this enough. Our struggle with Hezbollah in Lebanon is not a strategic or military issue. It is an existential issue. We lose it, we lose the north. You lose the north, you've lost half the country. The people will not go back to live in the north as long as that threat exists. The other night, Hezbollah fired a rocket at Ashdod, an hour south of Tel Aviv. And we had to run to the shelters because of that. So Hezbollah doesn't threaten just the Galilee. It threatens Tel Aviv and the central Israel. It is existential. And yet, here was the United States putting pressure on us, saying that, as the President Trump told Bibi and told him, to scale it down, hold back. But it got worse because if you look at the newspapers today, and literally today, the New York Times has a 10-page expose on the front page of the newspaper about the horrendous suffering we are inflicting on the innocent Lebanese people. That article does not mention one rocket Not one of the 6,000 rockets that Hezbollah fired at northern Israel. An article in the Wall Street Journal today. Israel kills 11 Lebanese.
The New Yorker has an article that says there's a sense that Israel is doing a deliberate ethnic cleansing in Lebanon.
There's a worse narrative. Israel, having dragged America into this unnecessary war, is now doing its best to prevent the conclusion of a peace treaty between Iran and the United States. And you see that headline again and again and again. That was another New York Times headline from 2 days ago. And I'm just paraphrasing. It says, Israeli military actions against Lebanon threatened the truce, the delicate truce between Iran and the United States. So we're thrusting America back into war. And these narratives are inestimably toxic and danger, not just to the state of Israel, but to the Jewish people worldwide.
I have a question. If we get to a situation where President Trump says, Israel, you have got to stop all the attacks on southern Lebanon because we want the deal with Iran, and Hezbollah is still firing away because the international media won't cover it, what is Israel going to do?
We have to fire back. We're just going to have to. I'm sorry. We're going to have to. You're
going to have to defy the President of the United States.
For the first time openly, with great reluctance, because we have no choice. You understand the betrayal of the people of Israel, of the meaning of Jewish sovereignty in this land, will be too great. Will be too great. And all right, we're just going to have to weather it.
Because what you're saying in the bigger picture is that you see this imminent sort of head-to-head train collision where it looked like President Trump was this great ally of Israel, and you see that coming to an end because the narrative is changing, because the interests are about to vastly diverge.
Yes, from Trump's perspective, there's a justification for it. I think in the long run, there isn't. I think that the countries are judged by the way they stand behind their allies, even during the tough times. You know, you can't argue with those gas prices. You can't argue with the stock market. You can't argue with the cost of living in the United States. You can't argue with a president who ran on, I'm not getting involved in any more wars in the Middle East. So that's what we're up against.
The United States could barely stomach about 5 weeks of war with Iran, and America is a superpower. For Israelis, this is a war that began on October 7, 2023. And I wonder if you could speak to the notion of how Israelis see this as a generational war, much like the 1948 War of Independence or the 1967 Six-Day War, which fundamentally reshaped the Middle East, versus the United States, which has no stomach for that type of long-term war, and what that ultimately means for either the relationship between these two countries or the West in general.
Oof. I think we need another 2 hours. I'll give you the 1-foot version, okay? For 2,000 years, we have begged the West to accept us as a people. We gave them art, literature, philosophy, architecture, and we got in return expulsions, inquisitions, and mass massacres. It's about time that we internalize the memo. We get the message. We're not wanted here. And beyond that, Israel is probably the last country in the West that's actually willing to defend itself and fight in any serious way. And what we've seen in this war is that the United States has exactly one dependable military ally in the world, and that's us. And we can see what's happening with these narratives. So we have to be very clear-eyed about this and say, well, we have to diversify our portfolio. We have to stop trying to beg our way back to the West. And the day before the war broke out, we had one of the most extraordinary events in our history. A day before the war broke out, we had a visit from the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, who just happens to be the democratically elected head of the biggest country on earth, okay, and the country that's probably going to dominate the world economically over the next 100 years. We have options, and we have to start moving toward those options. That doesn't mean America's not going to remain our friend to the best degree it can. We look at these polls that say that Israel is no longer, popular among the majority of Americans, and we have to be very, very clear-eyed. I mentioned earlier, just in passing, that the Israeli society is the most resilient society on the planet. It is, but we are also the most resilient people in history. And we have been through, what can I say, worse than what we've been through today with no matter how harrowing the challenges are. We will overcome this. We will survive this. It won't be easy. But in order to do that, we have to diversify our portfolio, be flexible in our foreign policy, be proactive, and above all, we have to establish our sovereignty internally within our own state and unify our people.
A lot of things to think about. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aviva. Thank you, everyone.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we're so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you shake your head, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 ways to support the show. First, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors to keep the show going. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.